All right, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Muck Growers Information Days 2026 version. We'd like to thank all our sponsors for helping support this day. Most of them are out there. If you have a chance, visit them during lunch, and we'll have door prizes just before we break for lunch as well. I'd like to welcome Dennis Van Dyke, the carrot specialist for OMAF. He's going to be the chair for today, and yeah, hope we have a good day.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, I have nothing else to say or introduce other than introducing our first speaker. And that will be Peter Rogers from Nunham's Bear, and I will leave it up to him to introduce himself further. And he'll be speaking about carrot root diseases.
Hey, thanks everybody. My name's Peter Rogers. I'm an 18-year expert in biennials working with BASF Nunham's. And in particular, today I want to talk to you about carrot storage diseases, which occur across Eastern North America, also to some degree in Europe. And I want to thank the committee for inviting me out to give this presentation. And hopefully in the end, you'll have a little bit better grasp on some of these things. I'm going to take you on a short tour of storage diseases, root diseases in particular that cause problems in storage. We'll talk about what do they look like, and some of the impacts they might have on commercial production. Diagnosing the problem, it's really critical. And I'm going to give you a practical diagnostic key, which might be useful to growers in that regard. Emphasis on field or soil-borne diseases versus storage manifested diseases. I think it's really important to recognize some of these occur in the field already, while others occur post-harvest or even post-washing at that time. Some key considerations I'll talk through regarding management approaches, particularly cultural practices, resistant varieties, storage units and conditions, and then the idea of putting this all together into a more holistic approach, which would allow you to use all of your tactics throughout the entire year to come up with an appropriate root disease and storage disease management recipe. So let's jump into that. First here, I wanted to show you that there are a number of microbes, insects, and others which cause diseases or disorders of carrots. Many of these happen in the field and then can be carried into storage, either knowingly or unknowingly. Some of the more important ones are the priority diseases that you see across, say, Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, even into Northern Europe as well. Things like white mold, which is caused by sclerotinia. This is often one that happens in the field with latent infections and then becomes a real serious problem in storage with spread later on, even bin to bin or root to root. I'll talk about gray mold, cavity spot, and fusarium a little bit more in depth here in a second, but those are also really critical and timely diseases which occur in the Canadian provinces. We also see things like black rot, Alternaria raticina, which is often causing a crown or blackening lesions on the upper crown of the root, even girdling at times. Bacterial soft rot, something you also see regularly. Bactobacterium causes sort of a soft, wet, warm ooze that collapses the carrots in storage. So there are a number of priority diseases here, which I think we see on a regular basis, year to year, year in and year out, which can cause problems. Let me talk a little bit more in depth about a few of those. So the botrytis gray mold is something that I think is uber common across the storages. And it's typically caused by a botrytis cinerea. And it will cause sort of first a soft brown or irregular kind of shaped collapse, which can be somewhat soft, somewhat macerated, but not completely liquidy. This can then give way to gray, fuzzy mycelium, which will grow on that particular lesion or on the surface of the carrot, and then can lead to sclerotia, which are resting structures really important to the fungus in staying in the soil or other locations for long periods of time. Most of the carrots are highly susceptible to botrytis. We don't have a lot of resistance that's available in the marketplace. And the longer they stay in storage, the tendency is for this to increase. One important thing is I think this is really, I want to encourage growers to think about hygiene practices around something like botrytis, because it can grow on wooden boxes. It can grow on almost anything that is organic in substrate. And therefore, it can be a problem continuing using those boxes if you're not cleaning them properly. Another key thing is that botrytis can be a real problem on the tips of carrots and get started there, or on the leaves. If you carry a lot of leaves into storage, you can see botrytis issues. If your tips get dried out, you tend to see a lot of gray mold build up on those leaf tips, or on the root tips. Another really important disease in your region that you're aware of is Pythium cavity spot. And now there are a number of different species that can induce cavities on carrots. They typically cause sunken gray to black centered lesions. They can sometimes be surrounded by halos. Sorry, jumped ahead there. And what you see is that this is really a soil-borne water mold, and it's a field disease, which maybe isn't obvious because we don't wash the carrots immediately out of the field. You may not see this. And that can lead to, let's say, increase or worsening problems with it in storage. Not so much spread, but worsening disease. Really important for prevention is, good soil structure, plowing that crop in, encouraging that to degrade. And then, of course, proper harvest timing. Definitely out here in the Western US, we see carrots being left in the field too long, and that tends to lead to pretty serious cavity spot or fusarium-related problems. So it's important to know that, as I mentioned, there's a diverse set of Pythium isolates which cause problems in carrots, and it's important to know that these particular isolates are not all equal. Some of them are, let's say, pathogenic, or some are even, highly virulent. And it's critical for you to have some tool to be able to tell what those are. So in our phytopathology world, we use something like a plug test, where we put a plug of the organism onto the carrot. We wait for a time period over a certain temperature, and then look at the lesion size that's created by that wound about 14 days later. And when we look across the different species and or isolates, all the ones in blue here are P. sulcatum, which is the most popular thing we do find. We see there's highly diverse reactions and virulence. Some are non-pathogenic, and some are highly virulent, causing significant lesions in a short period of time. And from this, you can get an idea that we have species and strains that can be very destructive. It's extremely important to understand what you might have in your soils or in your farm, and how impactful those might be to your outcome. Another related and key issue that we're seeing actually on the increase, I would say, as we look across to North America and Northern Europe, is fusarium root and crown rot. Now, typically we see different species involved in this. There are several. The most popular ones are Avanaceum, Solani, and so on. And typically this causes a really sunken, deep crater, which can be brown and then eventually turn gray or black. It will girdle the carrot. It can often colonize secondarily Pythium infections or Rhizoctonia infections, and you end up with sort of a smorgasbord of multiple fungi who are attacking your carrots. Again, we don't know a lot yet about prevention so much, but along the same general lines as what we see with other fungi, having proper drainage, good soil structure, good setup of your fields, good rotations, those are always critical to the outcome. But this is an area where I think we need to study a lot more about this particular disorder. Again, when we look at isolates, we compare them to, say, a Rhizoctonia Solani isolate that's virulent, or Botrytis cinerea isolates that's virulent. And we can see these fusarium can be very aggressive at times and cause some really significant lesions, even without wounding. And there are, again, a diversity of different organisms that will cause these. Some of the Vanaceums and Falciform are pretty aggressive, as it turns out, on carrot. So again, really important to know what you're doing, know what you have in your particular area. Rhizoctonia is another disease that you will probably encounter from time to time. And this particular version of it, the root and crown rot, is caused by Rhizoctonia solani. And it is also a diverse organism within the species. And they have a large number of differences in anastomosis groups, which can cause differing disorders on carrot. Ultimately, they cause black elongated lesions. It's typically soil-borne and then carried into storage. One of the biggest problems here is it stays around in the soil for a very long time. So we encourage you to have extremely long rotations and be careful because the host range is quite large for this organism in practice. There are a number of other diseases. I would call these maybe less significant, but something that you're going to encounter. Things like Mycocentrospora causing licorice rot. You might see Phytotheropori causing ring rot. I've definitely seen myself on the muck station crown gall and scab, these types of disorders. So crown gall caused by a bacteria, scab also. And these are just, I would say, things that are often very annoying and can cause some commercial losses, but may not be on the top of your list as the most devastating things you encounter. Also at the bottom here, I wanted to mention cylindrocarpin root rot is something we see coming out of the north of Europe. And it also seems to be, I don't know if it's growing in its intensity or if it's just being recognized more frequently as a problem. And this is typically causing a lot of unmarketable carrots, sometimes 40 to 50% losses in situations in Scandinavia. So how are you going to know what these organisms are? Well, of course, you need to have some sort of tools to diagnose these things. So in pathology, we use, sort of a strict set of steps to be able to diagnose these organisms, starting with grouping based on symptoms, using media, either selective or semi-selective, to isolate that organism. We use polymerase chain reaction based things, which is basically looking at sequence of the DNA of the organism. And by combining that together, we can come up with a good identity of what that specific species or maybe even strain is from those particular samples. In this case, I just show some frequency charts, exploring how these organisms might show up in a particular situation. Now, growers, I understand, don't have this at their fingertips. They're not going to be able to diagnose it in this way necessarily. They can use a professional company. They could take it to the university, for example, and get some support. But it is important to have good diagnostics and understand what your target is so that you can make appropriate disease management decisions, right? So I'll talk just quickly here about a practical, what I would call a rapid diagnostic key. I think this is really important for growers to recognize when they're harvesting the crop, when they're sorting that crop, and then storing or packing the crop. There's opportunities to look at these symptoms and then to, based on symptoms, identify what's the most likely cause that they're facing. And then to begin to keep track of that, what field did that come out of? What were the conditions that year that contributed to it? So on. And you can build essentially a really thorough understanding of your targets and what are really the best ways to approach disease management. So in this case, when you see something white mold, very obvious with black sclerotia, there's hardly anything else that's going to be on a carrot. So it's very obvious that you're going to have white mold in that situation. Similarly, botrytis causing gray mold has very distinct signs of the fungus that you can see coming out of that carrot. And therefore, it's reasonably easy to recognize those kind of disorders. As you go further to the right here on the chart, it gets more and more difficult because the symptoms are more similar and the diseases can look like each other, even be co-infections. And then the organisms causing them, there could be many of them that cause that similar symptom. So when you get into the right here with gray and brown, sunken lesions, pits, or even black spots, it's difficult to just do it by symptoms. It's a necessity to ask for some help there, maybe even look to a diagnostician to support that. But critical to know what's going on there. And noting the timing of infection is really important, field versus storage, when you actually see that. The reason why I mentioned that is that something like sclerotinia, which I have to say that the Canadian academic researchers, especially University of Guelph, Nova Scotia, others, have done a fantastic job to really sort out this disorder and understand the epidemiology and recognize control practices that would have an impact in storage. And I think that's a really a good story here as you look to managing these particular root diseases. Well, sclerotinia really affects the crop in the spring and early summer. Ascospores are deposited. They infect the canopy. You might see it in the stems, in the leaves, or on the soil inside the canopy. And of course, if we're not careful, there may be latent infections on the roots, which then manifest in storage. There are some key triggers, a dense and wet canopy, warm pockets in storage. If we can't get the temperature down rapidly enough when we put those in the storage, this can really manifest and be a serious problem. But it's an example of a field issue, could be managed in the field. And now, cutting the canopy, applying fungicides at the proper time, those are all key control strategies to prevent this from being an issue in storage. I think that's a real winner story for what's happened in the world here. There are other issues which are what I call true post-harvest disorders, and you got to be careful with this. They may not even occur in the field, or you may not be able to see them, and until you disturb the carrot, causing wounding, injury, you will not necessarily see these disorders. One of the most famous is cholera elegans, which is really a supermarket disorder. This thing happens after you wash the carrots and after you've stored it, and will happen between then and when the consumer gets the carrot. That's a really tough one to manage in that case. But recognizing how your cultural practices, how your commercial operations are really impacting that from the harvest point onwards is really critical for these types of true post-harvest disorders that occur out there. Now, you don't have to read. This is a very busy slide. I just want to mention on the left, though, that there are particular buckets for these control strategies, which you should consider when you're managing carrot root diseases. And it's a point at which you start at the field selection and you work all the way through the process of the crop until you're storing it. And at each one of these stages, there are practical recommendations that can assist with root-borne and soil-borne diseases, which are then carried into storage. So some really important ones, obviously talking about crop rotation, variety selection, picking your harvest timing, trying to minimize the wounding, for example, your storage temperatures and maintaining consistent conditions. I'll talk about that in a second. And of course, lastly, if needed, fungicides, biologicals, where we can help with some of that control. So just as a practical point of view, I think what's really critical, and this is important for us in our seed production too within BASF Nonims, is being able to maintain uniform temperature and airflow through your storage conditions and through that storage period is really, really critical to the outcome of the success, especially for these organisms like botrytis, sclerotinia that are going to show up in the storage room post-harvest. So maintaining good air supply, looking for hot spots, being aware where you might find disease or where your temperature is not uniform, looking for condensation, and recognizing that can all contribute to conditions, micro conditions that will favor diseases, and therefore you can take actions on those to try to improve some of that airflow, temperature, movement, and uniformity. Of course, another critical thing is sanitize those bins and be aware that there could be inoculum already in your system from some of these organisms. Another point here, as we get towards the end, cavity spot. There's a lot of commercially resistant varieties. There are claims that are made out there for resistant varieties, and that can be really useful to growers to apply to their program. There are varieties that are hyper susceptible that are still currently in the marketplace, and there are varieties that show intermediate and high levels of resistance. So recognizing these distinct differences in the reaction of the genetics and what hybrid you're using can be really helpful to preventing this from being a big headache later on. The resistance that we do see, can be multigenic. There's obviously, it's heritable, but it's quite complex. So I'll just throw in a plug here. Our newer hybrid carrot Brilliance, which is becoming a little bit more popular in Canada and North Europe. you can talk with Stoke Seeds, and that's available, has an intermediate level of resistance to cavity spot, and does well in conditions in Canada. There's a newer variety we're coming out with called Alliance, primarily in North Europe. Again, a very storage market driven variety, which shows good cavity spot resistance. So there are options out there for growers to utilize genetics and improve some of this control. So this is, again, a big slide, but just focus on one thing for me, is that really the holistic approach. Think of this from start to finish. You need to diagnose the problem. You need to be critical about knowing what it is that you're facing, the timing of infection, maybe even the mode of infection, so you have a better target to go after. I think success really starts at field selection and, of course, rotation. So really critical things that begin that sort of journey towards the success of your carrot yields. Preparation of the field, variety selection, a lot of cultural practices. This has a huge impact on your outcome. So irrigation and drainage, using resistant varieties, those kinds of things. Of course, care with harvest is really important. So wash line, being careful how you're handling and sorting the carrots and trying to reduce some of the damage. That can be really helpful to not having these post-harvest disorders from microinjury. And then, of course, trying to get the carrots to a cool temperature rapidly will offer long-term storage opportunities. And then, of course, hygiene practices. I kind of harped on that too. I think it's really important to know, if you're targeting the organism, can I clean things up and reduce my inoculum and have an impact? So with that, I'll just say a couple of key takeaways. Again, there are diverse groups of fungi and bacteria which are constantly eating away at your yields and your carrot productivity. And it's important to recognize what those are. There are some really key ones that you'll see year in and year out that you probably recognize and really loathe at times for impacting things. But it's critical to know your enemy, know what you're working with, approach this with the most appropriate strategies and tactics for your targeted outcome. I think that's really critical. And each disease, they have differing soil, field, harvest, and storage development patterns. And as you get to know those, there's opportunities to find weak points, which offer you controls. And with that target, I think there's a lot of considerations that you can come after: field selection, cultural practices, variety choice, that are practical tools in an IPM program that are really targeting carrot root disorders. Yeah, so with that, I'll take any questions that you might have, and thanks for having me.
Thank you, Peter. I don't know if you can hear that, but a solid round of applause in the room. Any questions for Peter? Anything to do with root diseases?
Not a question, but an observation. We've had the line Brilliance in our cavity spot trials for the last couple of years, and it looks really good in terms of low levels of cavity spot.
Nice. Yeah, thanks for that, Mary Ruth. That is helpful. Yeah, we've been working hard, I think, out of the Northern European breeding program to develop varieties really targeting cavity spot and storage. So look to those varieties and see what they can do in your particular situation.
Hey, your one slide said that if they go into storage wet is not as good as if they go into storage dry. Why would that matter when a lot of our storages are at 99% humidity?
That's a great question. Great question. So the real difference here is free moisture versus humidity, right? Free moisture condensation can be a bit of a problem if you have too much of it, and it creates a layer where these organisms can really survive well, especially things that survive at cold temperatures, as you suggested in storage. So free moisture can drive some of this, whereas humidity is keeping the carrot hydrated properly so that it isn't breaking down at the surface, allowing things, cracks, dehydration for things to be able to get in. So bringing in a lot of water into the storage and having free moisture on the carrots is very likely it takes longer to cool that, for one thing, and then it's very likely to drive those organisms to grow for a period on the surface of the carrot before you can get those temperatures down, which can lead to those kind of problems. So just the difference between free moisture condensation versus high humidity and not really building up on the surface can make all the difference for things like botrytis, for example.
Hi, Peter. Stoke Seeds here. Just a note for you and everyone in the room. For reasons, Alliance is called Tralliance in Canada.
Ah, Tralliance. Yep. Okay. Gotcha. Naming conventions. Yes. Thank you.
About brilliance carrots, they may be good for cavity spot, but we've been noticing when we're storing them that they're getting a lot of like mold on them in the boxes, and like the pack outs aren't really that good once we get to like February-ish. That's kind of what we've noticed with them. So I don't know, maybe they can work on that too.
Do you happen to know what is limiting that storage? What kind of mold you're talking about? Is it botrytis, or have you diagnosed what it is?
No, it's kind of both. It's all fuzzy. It's the easiest way to put it. Like, I don't know. It's just like once it hits like the middle of January, it's just like they look really, really good, and then they just take right off for us. And yeah, we're always ending up switching what we're shipping because of that.
Well, if you would, I can give you my email. Shoot me an email on the side. I'd love to know a little bit more about that. Fantastic. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Anyone else? Looks like it. You're off the hook. Thank you, Peter. Really appreciate that.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, we have our hybrid setup ready to go, and we are happy to welcome Margaret Alexiou to give us a bear update. I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. Glad to be here. My name is Margaret Alexiou. I'm with Bayer Crop Science. I'm the fruit and vegetable agronomist for part of Ontario. So I think I've met most of you, but if you haven't met me before, come chat with me at the table after. Yeah. So this is just a snapshot of the Bayer portfolio on the fruit and vegetable side. Some of these products might look familiar to you. You might use some of them, likely not all of them, for the crops you're growing, but just wanted to show you that we've got a fully loaded toolbox for you. Now, just to get into some updates before I talk actual product info, some discontinued products. Just want to announce and make sure you guys all know that Betamix B is no longer registered, and the last date of use of this product was December 31st of 2025. We haven't produced this for a number of years now, but yeah, just make sure you don't use it. And if you get audited, it won't be good. And this is our old formulation of DSIS 5EC. The last date of use of this formulation is December 31st of 2026, so this year. So if you have any of this old formulation in your sheds, this is the year to use it up. And we're trying to fully move to our new formulation, the 100 EC, which is just twice as concentrated. So just want to point out, use up your old inventory if you have. Divested product, not products, but we're saying goodbye to an old friend. Little moment of silence for Suncor. Suncor was registered in 1971. This is actually the longest selling Bayer product in Canada. But we recently just divested it to a different company called Sumitomo. And it still will be sold through a different company called Zipcam, but just so you know, if you are using Suncor, it's no longer part of the Bayer program, but yeah. So any questions so far on what I had said? Okay. So now let's chat a biological fungicide for a few minutes, the last bit of my time. So at Bayer, we've got a biological fungicide called Minuet. I've talked about this for a few years now, but I still see a lot of opportunity for you guys to use it in the marsh. So what is it? It's a Bacillus subtilis product, and you want to apply it in furrow. And this is registered on many different crop groups. Could be in your brassicas, your leafies, your bulb veg, your root veg, like the label's quite large. So it's got a 3-year shelf life, And something to point out, it has a really short reentry of 4 hours, and there's a 0-day pre-harvest interval. And here I just want to point out that not all strains of Bacillus subtilis are equal. There's like 1.5 million Bacillus subtilis products out there, but Bayer specifically chose this strain QST 713 because we saw the benefits of this specific strain. And you could see here, this is kind of how we compare it. You could see both these dogs have the same genus and species, but they obviously look very different, and they perform very different if they were going to pull your sled, right? So kind of think of that in your biologicals too. So like I said, Minuet is soil applied. It has a higher concentration of spores compared to our older product that was called Serenade Soil. That's since been reformulated, and now it's called Minuet. And it works by root colonization, and it also gives the plants a probiotic effect. It improves nutrient uptake, stimulates induced systemic response for plant defense against diseases. So this colonization starts on the roots within hours after application, and the roots are fully colonized within 2 to 3 days, and the Minuet adheres to the roots and doesn't wash off. And as that root continues to grow, this bacteria continues to colonize and protect that new root, kind of like a coat or a suit of armor. It just continues to grow with it. It will adhere to like kind of the seed, and so it's dormant when you apply it, and then it wakes up with the seed giving off like root exudates. So it should last most of the season, and it dies near the end, and like it doesn't overwinter, so you would have to apply it every year. And then this is just under a microscope on a tomato root. You could see on the left, this is the water control, and on the right, you could see the roots definitely grow a lot more when the Minuet is there, a lot more fine root hairs. Sorry, my phone's ringing and it's driving me nuts. Okay. So how Minuet improves nutrient uptake, it increases the root architecture, increased surface area, and more root hairs. And this strain of Bacillus subtilis, that QST 713, it produces enzymes that break down the soil components and form siderophores, which release iron into usable forms. And it also can make other nutrients more accessible to the plant. And it also triggers production of organic acids by the plant. And then this is just some graphs to show some actual data, but this is when Minuet was applied in furrow in potatoes across a bunch of trials. On average, there was a 6% yield bump when Minuet was used. And this is in tomatoes when it was added to the transplant water. There was an average of 8% yield bump when Minuet was used. And then this is just some work done by a researcher at a PEI named Ryan Barrett. He works on potatoes, but he noticed that Minuet did a pretty good job reducing black scurf in potatoes, so Rhizoctonia. And he also did work on common scab in potatoes. I know we're not talking potatoes today, but you could kind of correlate it back to carrots or whatever else you're growing. But I want to highlight, Minuet is not registered for common scab in potato, but Ryan's done the work for a couple of years now, and he's been seeing some really good benefits from it. You could see Minuet, that green bar there, the amount of scab is significantly reduced compared to the control. And then there's just some pictures to show, I don't know if it shows well on the screen, but the top is the untreated versus the bottom with Minuet. And you can see there's a lot more marketable yield and a ton like less scab in there. So overall, Minuet kind of acts as a plant probiotic. You'll see more vigorous and resilient crops. You could see this is a side-by-side row. I've shown this for a couple of years now, this picture, but on the left is the untreated, on the right is treated. This is in beets, and you could see just more growth and less disease on leaf. And then this is from that same field, kind of near harvest. You could see the quality difference from the grower standard compared to when Minuet was used. And the next picture, someone might recognize it because they sent it to me in this room. But on the left is when Minuet was used, and on the right is when Minuet was not used. Thanks, James, for the photo. So with that, I see a lot of opportunities in the marsh with pretty much all the crops you are growing. It's registered for onions, and we're registered for suppression of all your major diseases like Pythium, Rhizoc, Fusarium. We never claim control with biologicals, but they're there to help and add additional suppression. So in carrots, it could help with your cavity spot and your root rots, celery for damping off, and the list goes on, and your leafy veg and your brassicas too. So ideally, you want to plant this, you want to use this in furrow. If you're set up for an in-furrow application in your transplant water, that would be ideal. But you can also use this product like as a drench on your transplant trays if you need to. So yeah, if you are considering using Minuet, come chat with me and also chat with your retail egg supply to make sure that they have it in stock for when you need it, so that we're not shuffling around at, the day you want to plant and we don't have it. So come chat with us. And with that, I'll take any questions if there is. Yep.
Will the fumigation hurt the Minuet if you put it in a furrow? That's the question, yeah.
I might need Sherry to help, but I don't think it would survive that. What do you think, Sherry? She's my colleague in the audience. I could look into that. I could get back to you. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. So that's a tricky one, but we'll figure it out.
I would think if it doesn't hurt the seed, it probably also would not hurt what's applied in furrow. But
yeah,
if you're not frying your seed, then you would think that it's also not at a high enough concentration to fry what was applied. Any other questions? Margaret.
Does the phosphorus level in the finish the product working, and if you apply higher phosphorus rates?
It shouldn't affect that. No.
Anyone else? Janse?
But the Minuet will make some nutrients that are hard for the plant to get, make them more available. So, okay. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Marty. Okay, next up, we're going to welcome Matt Sheppard from the co-op. And most of you should know Christy Visser for a Muck vegetable research discussion. I will put this up and pass it over to you.
Thank you for coming and supporting the event.
All right. So Matt and I were kind of talking about what it is that we should talk about, and we kind of wanted to just go over what we saw this past year and hopefully get into a little bit what we might see going forward into this year. So it's kind of like what I've seen in the field over 2025 and what Matt has seen with you guys coming in and asking the questions. And we kind of tried to narrow that down a bit. So it's very surface. It's not too in-depth in some spots. If there's any area you want to talk more about, please feel free to shout it out there and give us questions. We would like this to be a little bit more interactive and not so much us just kind of saying, this is what we saw and this is what it is. So that's not always true. No, always the same case on every farm. So there is always open for discussion. So first of all right, so what happened with the weather in 2025? First of all, it was cold in March and April. It was wet, it was mucky, it was not a whole lot of fun. And then all of a sudden, May hit. and we hit the ground running. We started off cool and wet, and May was just everything happened all at once. So those years where everything happens all at once, that sets the stage for what happens throughout the year. When it all goes in at the same time, we all have the same problems at the same time, everything happens at the same time, and we're spraying at the same time, we are harvesting at the same time. So it kind of creates a bit of a mess. It's not fun to scout, it's not fun to spray, and this is where we run into a few problems. Also, we also get anxious when the spring is cold and wet, and everything goes into not ideal conditions just yet. We don't like waiting. So May was busy. May was really, really busy. And then June, July, August hit, and it got hot and dry, and hot, dry summers, as we know, creates a lot of insects, which then become difficult to control, especially once the temperature hits 30 degrees. One, chemicals don't work as well, and the bugs just love it. So insects reproduce really fast, and we have a hard time. It always feels like we're behind the 8 ball. When we have a lot of insects, we also get a lot of damage on the crop, which then is a vector for the disease to come in. So now we're fighting 2 different things. Then we hit September and October, which remained warm. So then we are harvesting in warm conditions. Your carrots are warm, your potatoes are warm, whatever is going into storage too hot. And that creates storage problems. So it was a battle, just like every other year. So what are we going to see in 2026? I don't know. This is what they're predicting. A cooler than normal March and April. It's looking like it might be the same as it was in 2025. Precipitation is to be normal or above. May can be the wild card, as it usually is. It could snow, it could be 30 degrees. So are we going to get all the crops in the ground in 10 days? Probably. And then hot, dry summer. So again, insects might be the problem. So what did we see in the carrots? As we already saw in the previous speaker, Sclerotinia. Sclerotinia is a fun one. We don't see it show up until later in the year. And then it is always when the canopy, just before the canopy starts closing up, that is when we want to start spraying. The moisture stays into that canopy. It creates a microclimate. It's warm, it's humid, the soil is humid. And this is where the problem starts. Sclerotinia is a funny little disease. It stays in the ground for many years. One of the best ways to get rid of it can be tillage, but you have to deep till the first year and then shallow till for previous years. And that isn't always what you want to do either. So it's a tough one. There's a few chemicals that do a decent job. Allegro is one of the better ones, and Luna Sensation is the other one that does a pretty good job. Any thoughts on that, Matt?
Yeah, timing, when you're trying to do everything else, also get that application on before the rows close in. And then a second application on really shortly after that. So, but trying to fit it all in, like Christy's saying, in a year like last year is a real challenge.
Has anyone done anything differently that they see is working? Yes. Yes. No. This is the problem. A plow is probably the best thing to use, but that is not practical for what you're doing. Yes. A muck, you guys as muck farmers are not the same as guys who farm on mineral soil. So yeah, you should be deep plowing to get rid of it. That is not what you should be doing on your muck. No, it doesn't. The disease doesn't work. What you need to do to control the disease with tillage is not going to work in muck as well. So you can deep tillage as deep as you can go. It will help, not going to be perfect. The next thing that we see a lot of, that I saw a lot of this year, is leaf hoppers. So leaf hoppers are, as someone who is in a field scouting, leaf hoppers are really hard to manage, as in terms of what you see in the field is not necessarily what you see as the aster yellows show up later. When the leaf hoppers are infecting the crop, it can show up 10 to 40 days after they are in that field. So when you are scouting for them, then you might not see a whole lot, but then all of a sudden, a month later, there's aster yellows throughout the whole farm. So this is a hard one to control. I think that we might need to start spraying for them earlier. And I don't know exactly how, I don't know about you guys here, but like trapping them. I don't know how to trap them. We do sweep nets, we do what we see out there, but it doesn't seem to be correlating as to what we're seeing as far as aster yellows later on in the season. So as we know, when we have aster yellows, we get these hairy roots and then they are not marketable. So there are options here, like 7, Savanto, yeah, those seem to be the ones that are working. I know we have some problems with those who are shipping to states as well as what we can use. So we don't have a whole lot of options. What else do I say? Yeah, there can be up to 2 to 5 generations per year. So obviously when it's hot and dry, we're going to get more generations, and that could create more infection as the season goes. As we get into warm falls, that is also prolonging the generations. And then we're seeing, as we get into harvest, there is a lot more aster yellows that shows up late. Thoughts on that?
Well,
yeah.
2 years ago, we did have a couple fields that had a big issue with that, and we very much.
I think that.
So, when to spray, that first generation, the thought is that the homegrown, overwintered aster yellows or leaf hoppers are not carrying the virus. But I don't know, Mary Ruth, what's your thought, Kevin or Dennis? Sorry, on that. So are we missing an opportunity for control?
In Michigan, they have a program where they sweep net for them in celery and carrots for the leaf hoppers. And then they take them back to the lab and then they test each one to see if they have it or not. And then they report that back based on like a county level. So that's a program that they have through Michigan State that they've put money at. I've exported a little bit to have something similar here, but we don't really have that now. But yeah, Michigan uses that as like an early warning sign because the populations are coming up from the south. If you can measure that, then you know what your risk is too, because it's not always the same every year. It fluctuates all over the place from like 1 to 10, 15, 30%. So a lot of times, if it's very high, we'll pass that information on. So the Michigan numbers, if they're high, will be in beyond vegetable crop report, and then it'll also usually tell Tyler that, hey, Michigan's finding high percentage, and then we'll usually put that in hydroponics at the end of it too. So if it's very high, usually we'll find a way to get that information out, but we're not usually like doing it on every 3 to 5 days. They come in through storms and things, mostly. Yeah.
But then as the weather gets more volatile, it seems to be, then we're probably going to have more issues with them as time goes on, is my thought. They were always kind of just a bug that was sort of out there, and now it's showing up at harvest, and it seems to be getting a little bit worse every year. Carrot weevils. So carrot weevils, there's only 1 generation per year. So it's usually your your early planted carrots that seem to get most of the problems. They are also they overwinter as, oh yeah, they overwinter as adults. So then when they wake up, once this ground is about 10 degrees Celsius, they crawl, and they will crawl to whatever field of carrots that is closest to them. They love the smell of carrots, which carrots give off at 2-3 leaf, and that's where they start laying their eggs. So trapping is, I don't know, I find trapping hard for them as well. You have to put the traps kind of where you think they are. And I guess here it's a little bit easier because your field, there's not a whole lot of like boundaries and fence rows and that kind of stuff. So they can be crawling from who knows where. I find that Ryman is doing a really good job. Imidan is okay, but Ryman seems to be doing better. Thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think getting the application on around the 2-leaf stage, I don't know, we can get anecdotal experience from everyone here. We don't see damage anymore, or very little damage, as long as the timing was there, as long as weather didn't get in the way of the sprays. And then a second spray, if it's needed, at the 4-leaf stage as well, just to make sure we're capturing the entire generation.
Does anyone have any big problems with it or not having a hard time managing them? No, seems to be pretty good. Unless you have a field that is, yeah, unless there's, like if you have a field that you always seem to have really big issues. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Your timing, dictates you need to, and 2 seems to be good.
Yeah. All right, onions. Oh.
Product.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or we have, is that on? We only really have one product, or we've been using one product, right? So I would make sure that your fields that you need that second or third spray, because it's the only product we have. Well, XRL is registered, but not sure it is effective, but maybe not as effective as Rymon.
I don't see it as effective.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just be cognizant of that if we lose Rymon or if it loses efficacy, then
then we don't have
where we were 5 years ago with Imidan or.
Yeah. Yeah. If you need that second spray or that third spray, then it needs to be, you need to have a field that is historically bad with weevils. All right, onions, Stymphalium. We seem to always like to talk about Stymphalium. This year, I felt like we had it relatively under control. Mainly the weather helped. It's not it doesn't love the hot and dry as much. But the products that we have, again, are okay. It is what it is, and we have what we have. So what are we doing about them? I think we need to spray as early as can, 3-4 leaf. We need to get ahead of it, and we need to stay on top of it. So you have Matt and I went back and forth on what we felt we liked. So take this with a grain of salt. We like Mancozeb early. Then maybe a Luna, Tranquility, and then Mancozeb, 2 Miravises, Allegro, Approvia, and Allegro. Now it takes you to mid-August. Now that is subject to change based on weather, and also we have to remember there are other diseases out there other than Stymphalium. If this is the only products that you put on, then other ones will show up. You still need to throw in, I think you still need to throw in a Quadris or, some of those other ones as well to make sure that we keep the other diseases at bay. I was actually saying to Matt, when I started scouting a million years ago, botrytis was the biggest problem that we had out in the field. I don't even know the last time I even saw botrytis out in the field. I don't even look for it anymore because we're so focused on Stymphalium, and these products are doing a good job on some of the other diseases that we see. So we need to stay on top of it. These products are what we have until some of the chemical companies come out with some new actives or something a little bit different, which I don't know if any of that's down the pipeline, but we have what we have. Yeah, nothing super exciting anytime soon. So, oh yeah, Matt mentioned that Luna Tranquility is expensive. So It's okay. Yeah. It's okay on Staphylium, but we also need it for other diseases out there too. So I would like to see it in the rotation still. I don't think it needs to be pulled out. I don't think it should be pulled out of rotation. I'm here for you. But just because some of these products are not working great on Staphylium doesn't mean that we need to not use them at all. Yep. Yep. Yep.
We found high resistance in Staphylium to Margaret and human.
Yes.
I suggest using the Lego first instead of Antidote.
Okay.
We're seeing not very much effect from Antidote and seeing some production with the Lego. And I'm not quite, I mean, Staphylium is not for foliage disease.
Mm-hmm. Yep. There's purple blotch still. Like there's still, I'm afraid of being so tunnel visioned into Staphylium that we forget about the other things out there. And then we come August and all of a sudden there's some other diseases that we see. That's just it just needs to be a broad picture, right?
But purple blotch almost only see after the that usually comes in after someone else's damage to me.
Yep.
In the market, we don't see it.
Just as an observation, or to let people know, we were at a conference in December, and everyone who grows onions in North America, Europe, New Zealand, they all have the same problem, and nobody controls it.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not alone. This is not the only area, and it doesn't mean that we're not doing anything wrong or that no one's doing anything better. That most people have it worse than us. We had similar trials to people in Michigan. We had maybe 40% disease. They had 70%. So we're in New York. It's they have it much. It's much more prevalent, and they have a harder time controlling it because they're just a little bit warmer, a little bit more humid, maybe. So it's not something that's unique to our situation, I guess. So nobody has a good answer. So
Well, it's good to know we're not alone in that. Okay, thrips. Thrips are fun. Basically, once they get going and once it's hot and dry, they're fun to keep out of your field. Movento early, 2 shots of Movento early seems to be doing a really good job. And then coming back with your X-Rails delegates, their Agramac is okay. Manecto Duo is probably one of the better products because it is your Agramac and X-Rail together. You still need to use surfactant, which I know nobody likes to use. But in order to make these products work, Agramac needs surfactant and Manecto Duo needs surfactant. The other thing with thrips, once they are in your field and moving across your field as they're scraping out the chlorophyll, this is also going to be your entry points for diseases. So this is one of the reasons why Staphylium gets into it. If you cannot control your thrips, you're going to have a disease problem. So again, if this year is hot and dry, this thrips will be a problem. They don't really fly. They like to float around on the wind currents and they will move in. So the other thing that we need to watch for is when they are harvesting wheat or cutting hay, those are the 2 crops that they love. As soon as that happens, they are going to move and they are going to find the first fields that they can. And if we are surrounded by those hay fields and wheat fields, they're coming to your onions. So, yeah, watch out for those issues as well. We have to keep aware. We have to be aware of what's going on in the other crops around us, right? All right, onion maggot. So as we have lost Laura's ban, we are trying to find other solutions. So right now we have Success and Very Mark. How are they doing? What are we seeing this year? Yeah, so basically, the jury's still out from what I've seen out in the field. We need to give it another year to really kind of see which one works better than the other. It is very, like, weather plays a big factor in it. And did it? Yep, and residual, yeah. Yeah.
So I think the same thing I said with carrots, that we know we're basically using one product on all our onions. And I know Brian Nault in New York State, he's trying to get, it's hard to do. You can't decide today, I want to switch my insecticides, right? You need to decide that earlier. But Governor or Trigard is registered. It is effective, especially with benflufen. Only using one, that would give, in 2 years, if you had two products, you'd be like 6 generations between, say, Suppresto exposure. That if we lose Suppresto, yeah, we seem to drop our maggots. There's not as many because I think our product is now effective. So we're not losing control and building the population like we were with Lorsban, right? We put lots of Lorsban down and still ended up with pictures like you have behind you, right? So something that people think about, if on your farm you switched all your insecticide 1 year to something different, but you need to decide that in the fall, not later on. That you just be exposing that population to a totally different chemical. And we've been working with seed treatments. There are new ones coming, but there's nothing right now. But
I think it's about 2 years.
Yeah,
the
maybe.
pipeline, I think. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So, and just as an aside, we're going to run a onion transplant onion maggot trial this year. So we've got plants in the greenhouse that we're going to use Verimark and Success and Delegate, and we're also using Suppresto as a seed treatment to start. So it does work. It just runs out of efficacy fairly early on, but it's also a potential option as well.
Okay, good. All right, next, micronutrient. All right, this was a fun one. So I put this up, that chart, that little picture up there, just to show that micros are a tough beast because, as like all nutrients, everything kind of interacts with everything else. So you might have low in one and high in another, but they're reacting to each other, and then you need to apply something else just to, make things fun. So what are the main micronutrients that we need in plants? Calcium strengthens cell walls. So we need this, obviously, as we're growing the crop, and we want strong plants to kind of keep out all of the diseases, keep Staphylium out. Even when you have thrips, a healthy plant is going to help keep that plant not succumb to all of that thrip damage before you can get in there and control them. Boron helps move calcium and sugars. So that's also during bulking, that's what you want to kind of get that bulb to bulk up, or those carrot roots to bulk up. Copper is going to strengthen your skins. So that gives you a strong skin on an onion or on a carrot for storage. Potassium moves nutrients from the leaves into your bulbs and into your roots. And the leaf diseases are the biggest threat to your storage, right? There's all these things happening in that plant, but where the photosynthesis is happening, if that is weak, your crop is not going to store as well throughout the winter. So when those leaves die, your neck is still there and it's still healthy, and it's going to get all of that disease that's floating around in there and create a crop that's not going to store. And that's where you make your money. So we need these crops to store. The one thing that we need to, I think, talk a little bit more about is mitigate stresses. There are a few products out there. There's more on the market, I'm sure. So these are products that we're using before a stress event. So before we know that hail might be coming, or a big rainfall, or some wind damage, even heat. These are things that we can try, the things that are out of our control, we can try and mitigate. So there are a few products. Megafoil, Janse has Megafoil, Nutri-Egg has Nutri-Lex. These are to be applied ahead of time when we know that one of these stresses might come through. And it's not going to be a silver bullet. You're not going, if there's a hail, you're not going to completely save your crop. You're going to help keep it healthy. So this is what we're trying to do. And then you might have to come back with maybe half a rate or a quarter rate and keep going and spoon feed that crop until it fully recovers, and keep on top of those nutrients so that the diseases that are out there are not going to get in there and take down the crop. You're not going to completely save a crop. You're never going to save a crop 100%. You're just trying to mitigate the stresses and keep them going and keep them healthy. Any questions on that? Any comments on that? Anyone see anything really cool out there with using any of these products? No? Okay, perfect. So what are some of the main ones that we want to use and the timings on those? In onions, early season. So just as they're coming out, 3 to 5 leaves, your new little transplants, you want to use a little bit of manganese for photosynthesis. Zinc is going to help with your leaf expansion, and copper is going to help with your leaf strength. A lot of you guys have your foliar programs that you like. This is not getting you to change anything. If it's working for you, have at her. A lot of the times it is, we put a lot of different products on, and sometimes we don't know what each one is doing and why we're using it. So this is just kind of a general view as to what each products are doing at that specific time. So it's not the be all and end all by any means either. So then mid-season, when we hit 6 leaf up to when we're bulking, we want a little bit of magnesium. This is when the heat is hitting the crop. So we want some magnesium for heat stress. We want to keep that plant green and healthy. Boron, we're going to add a little bit to move some sugars so that we're moving all of those sugars from the leaves into the roots or the bulbs. And then we want some calcium to keep those cell walls strength. Like, we want to keep the strength in those cell walls and keep them healthy as well. Late season, we're going to go with some potassium to thicken the skins and move some energy. And we want to keep up with that boron as they're bulking, because we want those onions to be hard and strong, and then we want those carrots to store. So storage, the most important things for storage is calcium, boron, and copper. If your onions, I know Rochelle and I have talked about this before. If your onions are not falling over, hit them with boron. Lots and lots of boron. It will help drive all of those sugars down. Oh, that plant is moving from your leaf. It's growing leaves, and you want it to flip to kind of into that, maturing stage. So yeah, 100% hit it with boron, and they will fall over and hopefully finish up properly. Carrots. So early season for your root elongation, so your 2 to 4 leaf, you want some zinc, some manganese, and some copper. So all of these things are going to get those plants going and keep them healthy and grow strong. You want them to grow good tops so that they start growing strong bottoms. Mid-season, your 6-leaf to canopy closure. Again, it's the same principle. You're using boron to move the sugars to the roots. You're using magnesium to keep the plant green, because this is when you have the heat. And you want the calcium for your skin finish. Late season, potassium and boron. So the generalization is the same, right? You want your magnesium, your manganese, and your zinc early. You want your boron and magnesium mid, and your boron and your calcium late. So now you have a tissue sample. And what do you do with these numbers? So this was taken in mid-July. It is carrots. And what do we see? What do we do with this? Your potassium, your magnesium, and your boron and your copper are low. But your magnesium and your potassium are tied together. So just because your magnesium is low and your potassium is high does not mean that your magnesium low and your potassium is high. It means that you need to balance out those two. So sometimes you need to apply a little bit more potassium. Also, when you get a tissue sample, this is a snapshot in time. Things move so fast at a plant, and this could be because it was taken just before it rained, so it was dry, or it could be just after it rained, or you irrigated, so the ground is wet. It's not the be all and end all. Do not panic when you get one and it's all red, because that means that the plant is using the nutrients you are giving it. So if you are always putting a little bit of magnesium in your tank and a little bit of boron in your tank, or a little bit of manganese in your tank, it's using all of those nutrients that you're giving it. When they are low, does not mean it's going to run out. It means it's using it. So your only one that really might be a bit of a concern is your copper, because it is extremely low. Now, muck soil has a hard time holding on to copper, and it's hard to get it into the plant. So a little bit of copper, quarter liter, will help, as you're mid-season to late season, to put it into your tank and keep these plants going. All right, again, this is an onion, again, taken mid-July. So it's hot, it's dry. And here, the all green kind of concerns me a little bit, because then it's not using all of the things that are there. So there's other issues going on. Maybe, I can't remember what was going on in this field when it was taken last year, but it could have just been irrigated, or we had some rain and things were just kind of sitting there. But I'm more concerned about something like this, where it's all green, than something like that, where it's all over the place. There's something else going on. And I would probably take another tissue sample just to double check, because things change so fast. But here with your mag low and your boron low, then we need to add a little bit of that. But this one I would retake. It shouldn't be perfect. A plant is never perfect. So there's something else happening here. Any questions? Anything? Okay. Oh, yep. Oh, wrap it up. Okay. So this is my last slide anyways. Okay, drones and AI sprayers. This is kind of where the technology is going. We need to not forget about the pre-emerges, as even if we are able to, what we can use with AI and drones. Drones currently, we can only apply products that have an aerial on the label. Which I did a quick search as to what that is. So Bravo, Luna Sensation, Matador, Imidan, Reason, Upside, Royal MH, and Savanto Prime. So I know that they're looking at phase 2, which will be looking to add drones to the label and not just the aerial. So this is definitely some really cool technology coming down the pipeline that, we'll see where it goes. As well, same with AI sprayers. Right now, it's only what is on the label for that crop, but hopefully we can start getting different products labels, like the desiccants, your Reglones, your AIM, Ignite, Partner, that kind of stuff. And then, I like them. There's going to be a place for them. I like what I've seen so far in the field crops. I think it's a really cool fit. The veggies it's going to be interesting where it goes as to what is going to be registered as far as products. Something that the one thing that I can see with drones, and maybe this is just me, but something like when you're going after thrips, you need a lot of water volume to get into that axis. That's going to be where the problems might be, where the products that we need a lot of water. In the field crops, where you're going in with like 2 gallons of water and Roundup, just to get some weeds, that's a no-brainer. So yeah, it's going to be see where the fit is. Disease like fungicides, I think it's going to be a good fit. It might even be to the point where, you have a little patch of downy mildew starting in a corner. You just go out and spray that corner. And then, so then there's a couple products under review.
So most of these reviews were triggered by either a review or a cancellation in Europe. So Zampro, for example, has been discontinued. Use of that has been discontinued in Europe. So we're probably 4 years from a PMRA decision here on what its future looks like. Ryman, which is pretty scary for us, same idea. But again, that's probably 4 or 5 years before we have really indication on where it's going. So not an immediate concern, but something that we'll want to consider. And Bravo, I don't think anyone can tell you what's going to happen with Bravo right now. But probably not great news. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you both. That leads quite naturally into our next presenters. That's the staff from OFVGA, the Ontario Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association. So I'll invite them up at this point and hand over the microphone.
Perfect. Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm Chris Duvelshoff with the Ontario Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association. These are my colleagues, Ben and Rachel. So we're going to cover a few different topics today. We'll get back to crop protection, but Rachel's going to lead it off talking about labor and safety nets and some of the economic analysis that she's working on.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Rachel Luo. I am the Policy and Economic Analyst at OFVGA. It's my first Muck conference. Great to be here. As Chris mentioned, we're going to do a team update of what our policy team has been up to this past year and a few examples of the work we've done to support our position. I'm going to start with safety nets. So provincially, our ask has been to accelerate the committed SDRM funds. Our federal ask is to restore the agri-stability trigger rate to 85%. We're also advocating for to permanently increase the interest-free amount of APP to a minimum of $350,000. As the next policy framework negotiations are coming up, we're also closely following those discussions too. So to support these safety nets asks, we've done a business environment pressure briefing. So I'm going to walk through some of the pressure points. The first one is the grower margin squeeze that's being felt across the sector. As we can see, year over year, energy cost and crop input cost has been soaring up. On the other side, from product price input, price index has been flat at on average 2%. If we look at Ontario's provincial support in terms of direct payment and compare with Quebec, we are receiving roughly 1% of our crop receipts in terms of direct payment. Quebec, on contrast, is receiving roughly 3%. So that's a 2% income advantage. And then if we compare Ontario with rest of Canada, Ontario represents roughly 20% of the Canadian non-supply management farm cash receipts, but we're only receiving about, on average, 10% in terms of the national BRM suite support. And then when we compare with our neighbors down south, in early 2025, the MASS program offered $2.6 billion in direct support to specialty crop growers. And in December, there was another $1 billion to specialty crop. And just this month, they issued a letter to President Trump to ask for another $5 billion. So all this disparity in in government support is giving our competitors an advantage to undercut in pricing. This is a scenario analysis of potential price undercut coming from either Quebec or US. If we look at the first line, when there is no price undercut, a few of the crops are already experiencing net farm income when you consider the overhead, capital cost, and interest. If there is a 5% price undercut from the competitors, 4 out of the 5 crops will be experiencing a net farm income loss. When there's 10% undercut, all of the crops will be losing money. So this is what we use to communicate with the government to advocate for better safety nets programs. On the labor side, federally, we are continuing to follow the ESDC's review of the temporary foreign worker program. Our position is to protect the SOP program and keep agriculture under its own program. Provincially, we're focused on the temporary foreign worker housing. There's ongoing engagement at Roma with the ministries. We've collaborated with OFA to do an economic impact analysis of the temporary foreign workers. And the results has been presented at the Municipal Planners and Economic Advisory Forum this past year. OFVGA is also participating in a working group led by farms to streamline the worker housing inspection. Some of you may be aware that there was a OFVGA industry survey the past spring. It was focusing on the grower challenges with temporary foreign worker housing within municipalities. And some of the top obstacles that were identified were permit delay, expectation change of the fire marshal, of the health unit, and zoning issues. So the OFA's economic impact study of temporary foreign workers identified that about half of the farm gate value and economic impact could be attributed to temporary foreign worker. And for Cinco region, for example, temporary foreign worker contribute 40 million to direct sales, which translate into 65 million in total economic output, 32 million to GDP, and it supports 271 jobs throughout the economy. And this is an example that came out in our survey. A grower in Chatham-Kent renovated his farm worker house only to find out it was reclassified as a boarding house. So he could no longer house the 11 workers that he had planned. This house is now only allowed to house 4. So the grower now needs 3 houses instead of 1 for all his 11 workers. So if we put that through and look at that through an economic lens, impact on the farm would be the sunk cost for his renovation. There's additional monthly rent, and the grower family would go through significant mental stress. But if we look at the broader economy, it adds strain to the tight local housing market. And if the grower decides to not rent and reduce his number of workers by 7, that would potentially reduce his sales by this much. And in turn, it would cost the economy and a loss in GDP and loss in jobs. So that's what we've been using to communicate to the municipalities in terms of the importance of worker housing. One additional study that we did on the crop protection side is to update the 2016 AAFC report on economic impact of the minor use program. We've followed the same methodology that was used in the original report, but we've updated with the 2024 data. So the key findings for this update is that with the minor use program, an average of 1.5 billion of crop losses was avoided. An average of 12 million, the government spent on average $12 million each year to support minor use program. And a general return of investment for the government investment is 111 to 1. The program adds 1.6 billion to the GDP for Canadian economy, and it supports 12,000 jobs in general. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris to take a closer look at crop protection.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rachel. Rachel started with us at OFVGA in the fall, and so she did a great job covering off the labor and safety nets policy files. That's not her main responsibility. So she's actually an agricultural economist by background. This is a new role for us, but so far it's been an excellent fit, and she's really been able to look into some of these numbers on a lot deeper level, which you saw, some of this analysis here on the minor use program. So we're using that to advocate on behalf of you, the growers, for the policy objectives that would support the Ontario fruit and vegetable growers. So thanks very much for that, Rachel. Okay, moving on to crop protection. So as you've noticed, each of the sections at OFVGA have a committee chair. And for crop protection, it's none other than Bradford's own Matt Sheppard. So this is his second year, and the membership thought he was fit to re-elect for a second year. So glad to have you again, Matt. Just spent a week together in Ottawa, and it was a great week, very productive at the minor use meetings. So what I'm going to cover pretty quickly, because some of it's already been touched upon. The first one is talking about PMRA, which stands for Pest Management Regulatory Agency. It's part of Health Canada, and it's the federal agency responsible for essentially determining the rules of crop protection products, what can be used, what can't be used, and under what circumstances. So I'm going to talk about their registrations, a couple of new things that have come through, some of the reviews, which we were just talking about a little bit, and as well as some policy updates. And then finally, finish off this section talking about some of the advocacy work that we're doing, which Matt was just mentioning at the end of their presentation as well. So in general, I've been doing quite a few of these over the years, and I would say this one's actually pretty positive. So that's kind of nice for a change. So PMRA registrations and reviews. So in terms of registrations, actually, I think I'm starting off with reviews, aren't I? So in terms of reviews, so there's two ways that PMRA reviews products. So this is after something comes to market. By the legislation that they have, they need to either start reviewing it again in every 15 years and see if it's still meeting the current standards for human health and environment. Or there's the special reviews, and a special review is some new information that comes up, like a European study that says the risk needs to be reviewed, and then they open it up and take a look at it again. So a lot of the stuff now is under 15-year reevaluations. There was only one related to muck vegetable crops or veggie crops here in 2025 that was finished, and that was abamectin, which is the product in AgriMac and Minecto Pro. So that was approved for continued use, which is good news. There was some label changes. So in this case, the total amount allowed for onion and celery was reduced, which led to a reduced total number of applications, but you still have single applications that are at the same rate. The main sort of new measure on the label, and it's across the label on all applications, is the addition of what's called a vegetative filter strip. Whenever PMRA does make these changes, there is an implementation timeline. So in this case, the new label actually becomes effective starting July 31, 2027. So there is a transition period while the old label is still current. So for vegetative filter strip, just because you might start seeing this on some other labels as well, I thought I'd put this in here. But what the vegetative filter strip is a strip of vegetation between the field and a downhill body of water that's there all year. So it's that green zone there with the grasses and bushes and trees and stuff. And so on the labels, it's always 10 meters. It's a standard width. The purpose of it is to slow down any runoff that would come down the slope of the field and force it to enter the ground before going directly into the water. It's to stop soil and stuff like that running directly into the water, which may contain residues. The actual composition of the vegetative filter strip, it needs to be at least 6 inches high of grass, but anything taller than that is fine too. So shrubs, trees, anything else. The only thing it can't be is like bare soil or short mowed grass. If there's no slope, you don't need a vegetative filter strip. So it's pretty straightforward that way. Or if there's a slope and then it goes up again, you don't need a vegetative filter strip. So it's directly downhill with water at the bottom. In terms of what's upcoming for reviews, the main one we're kind of watching in the next year is going to be chlorothalonil. I've been saying that now for a couple of years. There are some other ones underway, which Matt mentioned, like Rymon. But that is, Tim, also, that product is less than 20 years old. It was registered under sort of the newer guidelines. So hopefully we won't see as drastic changes when that one does come through. In terms of notable new products in the last year, these are what's called Category A registrations. That just means that it's the first time this active ingredient has ever been to Canada. So a couple of new things to mention here. The first one is from Bayer, which is fluoxypiperlin. Product name is Savannah Prime. It is in the same group as Arondis, so group 49, product for downy mildew and Phytophthora. It is registered on most vegetable crops. I'm told that the label isn't quite ready for onions this year, and something the company's working to get in order for, I think, next year. But it will be another option in the downy mildew category, probably for next year. Then the other one it's worth mentioning is Metametron, which is under the trade name Brevis. It's from Adama. It's actually registered here in Canada as a PGR for thinning apples and pears. It's not an apple meeting, but this active ingredient actually was developed as a herbicide and is registered as a herbicide for vegetables in other parts of the world. Probably someone was using it as a herbicide for vegetables and accidentally got it on some apples and realized that some of them, the apples fell off and they turned it into an apple thinner as well. So hopefully there's potential there for vegetables. The main thing it's actually registered on elsewhere is for beets, as a pigweed control product in beets. So hopefully we can get that developed here. There is also there's some interest in IR4 with which is the U.S. minor use program for this as well in carrots. I'm not sure if the Muck team here has looked at this as a herbicide for carrots at all. Looks like no, but hopefully there's potential there. And of course, this has already been mentioned, but Betamix B has been canceled as of the end of last year. Moving on to policy now. So we started mentioning this a couple of years ago. PMRA changed their policy on tank mixing active ingredients in the same tank. So this is now in effect as at the end of last year. The requirement is that any PCPA, which is the pest control products that are in the tank, on their label, they must have something about tank mixing for the tank mix to be permitted. So there's two ways that this can be done. The first one is that the combination is specifically mentioned on the label. So this insecticide with this fungicide, or there can be this generic paragraph statement that appears on the label, says this product can be tank mixed with blah, 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 provided that you follow the most restrictive label when it comes to things like buffer zones, environmental precautions, reentry intervals, that type of thing. For the most part, almost everything that I've seen has been the bottom part of that, where they do the general statement. So that's one thing to look for this year. Drones, it's already been mentioned. Been mentioning this for a couple of years, coming soon. Really, it's coming very soon. So that is correct. It's not finalized yet, but there is a proposal to allow drone spraying with existing registered products. It's in the first phase. The consultation has already been done, and expect that this will be finalized probably by summer. So what is this going to look like for the first round? It's going to be stuff that's already registered on that crop for aerial application, provided that you use the same application rate, spray volume, etc., all the other directions as per the existing aerial label. You'll need to follow the buffer zone for rotary winged aircraft, so helicopters. At this point, in the future, there will be a drone-specific buffer zone that's being developed. That will be smaller than a helicopter buffer zone. Any PPE, gloves, suits, etc., for the pilot, mixer, loader, and any other workers of the drone has to match that required for the ground application that's on the label. Then the pilot themselves, they comply with the existing Transport Canada drone requirements. And that is a licensing scheme that we have. It's based on the size of drone that you have. I think it's up to 150 kilograms gross weight now, which is quite a bit. Is the advanced operations certificate. I think it's an online course type thing and test. And then any other provincial certification and training requirements. So if you're using a drone to spray pesticides, there would still be pesticide training that you would need to have associated with that. And then I'm glad someone has done the homework in terms of what products for vegetables are already registered for aerial application. It's one thing that we're kind of, I think, all trying to figure out right now. Probably the best person to ask on that right now is going to be Dennis and Caesar and the other OMAFA specialists who are going to probably figure out something for the crop hub. But this is just one I happen to be looking at, Zampro, and it does have an aerial label already for onions. So if this policy goes forward, it won't require any label change to this label. It can be used by drone at that when that policy is finalized. Okay, just finally finishing off this section here, talking about advocacy. So it's something that is a big focus for us at OFVGA. One thing we've talked a lot about is, why can't, say, PMRA and other regulatory bodies consider the impact of their decisions on food production, on the growers, on economics, something that we are seeing some movement on. So you may have seen, but under the Mark Carney election platform from this past spring, one of the election promises as part of that is that the government would amend the mandate of the Pest Management Regulatory Agency to ensure that it considers food security and the cost of food in all their regulatory decisions. It's an election campaign promise. Dollar beers, we haven't seen that one yet either. So, it doesn't mean anything in the election platform until it actually gets into a legislative change. So we're working towards that. As a follow-up, we had an opportunity to be a witness in a parliamentary agriculture committee this past fall. And so this would be a cross-partisan committee in Parliament focusing on agriculture, that they make recommendations to the general members of Parliament. And in their report from the fall, they also echoed that recommendation that the Government of Canada change the mandate of PMRA to include economy, food security, and the cost of food. So we now have that as a formal recommendation. We've been told that food and food security is a priority for the Prime Minister. So we do hope that we can make some progress on this file this year. And with that, that's the end of crop protection. And now we're going to move into kind of more of a labor focus again with my colleague, Ben.
Thanks, Chris, and good morning, everyone. I'll try to be quick here. I know last stop before lunch, but shifting the conversation a little bit here, going to talk more on a communications front, some of the things that we're doing with More Than a Migrant, or on the communication side of things, sorry. I'm going to touch on a campaign that we started about 5 years ago now called More Than a Migrant Worker. Hopefully some of you might be familiar with it. If not, that's all right. I'm going to spend a few minutes here kind of giving a brief introduction and background on More Than a Migrant Worker. If you think back 5 years ago, so More Than a Migrant Worker was born out of the pandemic, and not that we want to go back there, but you might recall there was a lot of unfortunate negative news coverage surrounding the topic of migrant farm workers on fruit and vegetable farms here in Ontario. And not that we'll ever support or condone bad actors, but we knew we had to start telling our own story. 99% of the stories coming from farms are so positive in nature. And unfortunately, most of those stories were never seeing the light of day, right? So we put our heads together and we created what we now call our More Than a Migrant Worker campaign. At the core of this campaign, essentially what we're trying to do, we're trying to celebrate and build appreciation for the tremendous individuals, the individuals in this case being the seasonal agricultural workers who come to Ontario and to Canada and how they contribute to our local food production, about validating the importance of getting things right, including all the recent work at the federal and provincial level to remedy weaknesses in the system and address bad actors. It's about sharing the stories of some of the many men and women who help us grow our domestic food supply. And I'll just highlight that point for a second here, because I think we've been able to do a lot of neat things with this initiative, but I think the most important thing we've been able to do is to give these workers a platform to share and to tell their stories with the rest of us, the rest of Ontario, the rest of Canada for that matter. And I know with this audience, I'm preaching to the choir a little bit. You've had the chance, obviously the growers to meet and hear some of these men and women, their remarkable stories. But our audience is more those people downtown Toronto, right? Those people that have probably never stepped on a farm in their life. And the hope is that they're reading these stories, and the next time they're eating an apple or they're eating a carrot, they can kind of look at it and make that connection, right? Like, hey, I know where this apple or carrot came from. I know all the hard work that went into growing and producing this. And most importantly, they can now put a face to the people that play such an integral role in Ontario's fruit and vegetable production. And then looking at the last point as well, so there's a huge educational component built into what we do with More Than a Migrant Worker. So that's where we're trying to address some of those myths and misconceptions that people may have about either the SOP program or the TFW program, and looking at questions that we know people are interested in, whether that's the housing standards, the housing regulations, the wages the workers earn, the healthcare coverage they receive. So we know people have questions about this stuff, and we're trying to address and answer those questions in the best way that we can. So sticking on the storytelling theme for a second here, these are just a few photos from the many on-farm worker interviews that we've been able to do. These on-farm worker interviews really are the backbone of everything that we do with More Than a Migrant Worker. So we're using these interviews in whether it's Go Train posters, radio advertisements, YouTube advertising stuff. And the buy-in from the overall farming community on this project has been nothing short of amazing. When we started this project, we really had to rely on some of our connections, some of the growers we had good relationships with, and essentially invite ourselves to their farms and and they took a chance on us, and we interviewed some of their workers, and they were so gracious and taking their time out of their day to share their stories with us. At this point, we have farmers reaching out to us and asking, hey, I think you guys should come visit our farm. We have some workers that would love to share their stories with you. At this point, we visited over 30 farms and interviewed well over 100 workers, which has been amazing to see. Looking at some of the tactics that we're using. So of course, social media is huge for our platform. So Instagram and Facebook, especially, we're posting to quite regularly. News articles are another huge piece of what we're doing with More Than a Migrant Worker. Sponsored content articles with publications like the National Post, like the Toronto Star. We work with a great agricultural journalist, Lillian Shire, who does an amazing job writing these stories, and she does a good job at tying in the technical elements, or what some people may say, the more boring stuff, and that's the housing standards, housing regulations, tying those stuff in with the worker stories to really create engaging, compelling stories for the audience to read. We have a great blog page as well, so very similar to what I just talked about there, but that's where we're able to address some of those questions that I was talking about earlier. So people are interested in what the bunk housing looks like, what are the wages they're earning, the healthcare coverage they receive. So we're able to address these questions on the blog page in a bit more of a conversational, informal way. And we've done a lot of cool video advertising stuff as well. We had a really cool Cineplex campaign last year. So throughout the month of June, people, if you were seeing a movie in select theaters across the province, would have seen one of our ads before the show. Some of the important themes, these being on more of the kind of educational piece, and these really tie into our labor policy and what our policy team is doing as well. I won't dive into all of these, but I think the one big theme right now is the importance of the seasonal agricultural worker program to our sector. And it's no surprise, obviously, there's talks within the federal government right now of rehauling the complete TFW program, and SOP could be seen as collateral damage within that. So obviously, as Rachel pointed out, our stance is to keep the SOP program as is. So we're doing a lot of work to develop messaging and just reinforce why SOP really is that gold standard of TFW programs. There's already so many great mechanisms built into it. And if anything, the program should be looked at more as a model for other TFW streams, not something that needs to be built from the ground up. The other one I'll address here is so addressing misleading media stories and images. I'm sure everybody's come across these in the past couple of years as other sectors start to bring in more and more TFWs. The best example I can give of this, so there was an article, this is probably a year and a half ago, and the headline read something along the lines of company fined for mistreatment of TFW workers. And you read the whole article and it's talking about a trucking company somewhere out west, and not a single mention of agriculture throughout the entire article. But then you go back and look at the image that was used, and sure enough, it's a worker standing in a farm field, right? So obviously that's incredibly misleading and not fair to the sector whatsoever. So when we're seeing this type of stuff, we're quick to reach out to the publication. And unfortunate, it's a lot of times I don't think the publication or the editor is doing it in a place of maliciousness. A lot of times it's just they don't know any better, which obviously we have to continue to work at and change that perception. So one thing we're excited about in 2026, so this marks the 60th anniversary of the SOP program. So we're doing a lot of stuff we have planned to celebrate that milestone. And each year we kind of put our heads together and we say, how can we continue to evolve More Than a Migrant Worker and take it to the next level? So at one point, somebody mentioned last year, okay, it's great. We're on the farms here in Ontario and we're hearing some of these workers tell stories about, hey, you should see the renovation I've been able to do on my house because of the money I've earned here. You should meet my son who I've been able to put through secondary school because of the money I've earned here, right? So it's one thing to be able to hear that and see them tell it from the farm here in Ontario, but would it ever be possible to actually go visit them at their homes, wherever they may be from, and you actually get to see that renovation firsthand, or you get to meet their son, right? So that what started out as a bit of a dream actually became a reality in early February. We had the amazing opportunity with a lot of help from the Jamaican Liaison Service. We traveled down to Jamaica for a few days where we were able to interview 4 Jamaican seasonal workers. We were able to go to their houses, able to meet their families, get a good tour of their community. It was a truly amazing experience, and just getting a sense for the pride that all these workers, you could kind of feel that pride from getting to tell their stories and show us their families and show us those renovations, and all the farming is definitely a huge part of their lives back at home as well. So they were able to show that stuff off as well. But we're so excited to turn this trip into kind of each one of these workers will have a short documentary style video where we've been able to interview them at the farm here in Ontario, but then back at their homes in Jamaica. So we're hoping to have those videos ready to go out in sometime throughout May. So we're really excited about those. The last thing I'll touch on, and this is completely off topic from everything I just mentioned with more than a migrant worker, but we had the audience here today and wanted to use as an opportunity to plug some of the other communication stuff that we're working on with the OFVGA. And really, most of our communication stuff, a lot of it is designed to help and support our policy teams. So, of course, more than a migrant worker has been huge on the labor policy side of things, but we're working on some of our other files as well. So late last year, we did a great 3-series article with the help of Chris and Matt, who I see left the room here. But it focused on crop protection, and really it evaluated or looked at different themes within crop protection, each article individually, but that main theme being, why is crop protection so important to our growers? Why do our growers need access to these products? Looking at some of the disadvantages that our growers are facing when you compare us to some other growers across the world and even across our country. And that general lens of looking at crop protection through food security and food sovereignty and how that plays into the picture as well. So all those articles were placed in the National Post, but they're on our website as well, and certainly encourage people to visit our website and take a read through those if you have the chance. So with that, I think I'll wrap things up here. If there are any questions, we're happy to take them. And if we don't have an answer, we can take it back to the right staff person at the association as well. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for the morning session. So thank you to our sponsors for the lunch and the gifts, all listed here. Thank you so much. BASF, FMC, Alliance AgriTurf, Seedway, Holmes Agro, FS, Partners, Corteva, Stokes, Syngenta, Vive Crop Protection, NutriAg, Bayer, and Howling Americas. Thank you for supporting this day. Back here at 1:40, and we'll see you then. Okay, welcome back for our short afternoon session. We are pleased to welcome Anne from BASF to chat with us about BASF's update.
Okay, afternoon, everybody, and thanks for coming back after lunch. I'm just up here for a very brief moment to give a very exciting update and cover some staffing updates as well. So my name's Anne McRae. I'm with BASF, one of your favorite chemical companies, and just giving a sort of bit of an update. I work on the tech service side, so I kind of cover coast to coast all of our fruit and veg crops and portfolio. I kind of work with our research team and with our sales team and help with launching new products and dealing with any research trials that are out in the field. So I'm going to start briefly just updating. If for those of you that kind of knew Chelsea Steenbergen, she is our sales rep in Ontario. She is currently on a maternity leave, so I'm here to introduce Carly. So Carly will be our new sales rep for Ontario. So if you'd like to give her a call, contact information is there, or email, ask her any questions, or bring her out to your fields to check out and learn some more about carrots and onions and any other crops. That would be great. So Carly is available at any time and you can give her a call. But my other exciting news is to talk about Zidua. So most of you probably know what Zidua is, but we have finally received registration for Zidua on carrots, which we're really excited about, and we have been waiting for an epically long time. So this is a minor use project that I think started about 8 years ago, and there was a lot of research done here to kind of show the benefits of this herbicide. And so we are very excited that we finally got this on the label. So I do want to run over sort of what Zidua is if you have not seen it before. Some of the key things that are on the label, just so you're aware what we have there. So first of all, for those of you that don't know what Zidua is, this is a group 15 herbicide. Typically covers a lot of grasses and some of the broadleaf weeds as well. For carrots specifically, we have green and yellow foxtails and pigweed. So pigweed was the big one that a lot of the research was done for Zidua. The nice thing about Zidua is the low water solubility. So basically, you can get a lot of rain or a lot of irrigation and it stays in that top soil profile, which really helps with stopping those weeds. So this is not something that burns off weeds. This is something that stops weeds from coming out of the ground. So it does need to be applied before the weeds are present. A few of the things on the label, we do require moisture to activate. So 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch. My recommendation would be 3/4 if you can control the rain, or if you're able to irrigate. 3/4 to an inch just makes it work that much better. And if you're concerned about too much rain, I haven't seen any amount of rain that's ever, really moved it through the soil profile. So it really does stay where you put it. It's a liquid product. It's pretty easy to use. Key things about carrots. This is a post-application only. So if there's anything that you want to remember about Zidua is please apply it post to carrots. We have seen a lot of injuries with carrots if you apply it pre. And this is a product that is applied pre in other crops. So sometimes there's some confusion. This is post only. On the label, it should be applied at 2 to 3 leaf, and the rate is 73 mils per acre. It works out to about 55 acres per jug. So just if there's any questions about Zidua at all, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm sure you guys have seen this in trials and other places as well. And that was my major update. I just wanted to also remind you that we do have a number of products registered on carrots. We have Prowl as well for herbicides, and then we will be adding Zidua to this as well. And then, of course, Maravon and Circadus are probably some of our key fungicides, and Serafil is our biological. If you have any questions about biologicals, we like to talk about those too. And our crop guide can be found at agsolutions.ca/horticulture. If you want to learn about any of the products, links to the labels, any of the information, you can check it out there. Perfect. And that was everything I had.
So I guess I'm next, actually. As I prepare to speak, I can talk a little bit to Doug's question about mineral soils. We added recently, let me put this one on, I see. We added recently another vegetable crop specialist to the OMAFRA team, which had not happened in ever. So we hired Chris McNaughton, who was basically the vegetable weed technician out of Ridgetown. And so that program also looked at Zidua on mineral soils down in Ridgetown for a number of years. And so we have a little bit of data that looks like it's safe post and well post, and it's much more, you see a lot more injury anywhere close to pre-emerge. So that's one thing on the list of something that we are going to look at for potential minor use, but to get that expanded, and it won't require a whole lot of extra data packages or things like that. It's mostly just, the tolerance data, but that's, I can say, something that we have on the list of things to look at. So, okay. So my presentation will not be a PowerPoint. We're just going to do a live demo. So show of hands, who has ever used the Ontario Crop Protection Hub? A handful. Okay. I would love your feedback as well. But for those of you who have not used it, I would love to show you a little bit of why maybe you should. So if you go into Google and you type in Crop Protection Hub, the Ontario Crop Protection Hub will show up. So select the Crop Protection Hub, takes you to this homepage. Across the top, you'll see most of the searches. So that's our weed control search is separate from our insecticide, fungicide search. And then you can also just search for all products and sort of filter based on that. I will take you first through the first one. Let's go to weed control. So if you go to the weed control search, this will be everything to do with herbicides and weed control. So let's see. Beets. Let's look at beets because we heard about beet herbicides a little earlier today. And let's see what you have for beets. Let's see pre-emergence, and you have dual magnum. Congratulations. So if you ever grown beets, you know that there's not much registered on beets. So let's not use that as an example. Let's go to carrots. We can do cabbage too. Okay, well, let's go carrots first. So we'll have lots of options. So let's look for pre-emerge options on carrots. You know, you have a couple different options that you can play with. If you really want to get specific, you can start typing in weeds you're really worried about. Redroot pigweed, of course. Let's say, I don't know, lamb's quarters is second extent. And the list will filter based on the efficacy of these products to the weeds that you select as you populate them. If you want a quick jump around, let's say you have a special sprayer that maybe can spray in between the rows in carrots and you want to know what's registered for that use, you can just hop over here and then it'll show you everything that's registered to use in between the rows in carrots. What was the request? Cabbage. Let's see what cabbage looks like. So cabbage, I don't know, same thing. So you have to select the timing stage in the weed control search. This is not necessarily the case in some of the other searches, but let's say pre-emerge, you got sulfentrazone, basically goal, and dual, a couple of different options, things like that. Everything else is the same. You can look for different treatments and different weeds and filter down the list from there. Let's see. So if you look here on the side, it should give you everything that's registered and the other timings. So if you select post-emergence, in cabbage, you get Excel Super, Lontrell, Group 4. So a grass herbicide, Lontrell, some more grass herbicides, and more Lontrell. So that's about it. Yeah. The carrot weed control search is much more interesting than beets and cabbage. So let's move over to the crop protection. So you just select crop protection. And of course, all you care about is vegetables. So you select vegetables. And so this will be everything to do with insecticides and fungicides. Let's go back to carrots. Just select carrots. It'll pop down. These links up top will stay the same. So if you just want to bookmark this, you can bookmark this tab onto the bookmark page and it will always be there. So you just make a bookmark. And when you select this, it'll come back to the same page if you want. So you could send at any point during the crop search, what you see, you can send to somebody else. So if you have something that you want somebody else to see, just select the thing at the top and text or email it to somebody else, and that will show up what you see. So everything registered on carrots is on this list right now. Might be helpful, may not be super helpful. So tying it down by application methods probably helpful. Let's say anything to do with in-furrow application on carrots is registered here. You know, you got Minuet we heard earlier today, Ridamil, of course. Let's say we are in the middle of the season and we are worried about we got leaf blight popping up. Apparently we have Alternaria and Cercospora leaf blights. So if you look on the top of the cards the efficacy will change based on what you put in. So for example, we have Alternaria and Cercospora. Normally, as scouts, we'll just report leaf blight back to the grower. But it's sometimes important to know the difference, because if you see I take off Cercospora, the list can sometimes change. Because if I add Cercospora, maybe this is a better example. If I add Cercospora, the efficacy will change. But if I remove Alternaria from it, some of the products will no longer be available. So there's a difference between the leaf blights in terms of what is registered and what is going to be effective. So let's say I have Alternaria, Cercospora, and I'm also worried about white mold. You can add this to the list and it will adjust based on what is the most efficacious. You see Allegro there. It has a reduced efficacy because, of course, it does not have Cercospora on the list, on the label. Yeah, sure. So let's say I am looking to control white mold. So if I go to Allegro, I can see the efficacy breakdown, which has everything that it's registered on, or I can go to view details. In the view details, it'll have everything you need to know about the product. So up top, it has a link to the label. If you click on this, it'll give you a separate link right to the PMRA label search. You can open the label directly there and confirm if you need to. Otherwise, it has frac groups, all your rate information, what it's registered on, any separate specific notes to make about that application. So apply for white mold right before row closure, get good coverage to get to the in between the rows. It'll give you re-entry intervals. It'll give you pre-harvest intervals. It'll give you how many applications it's registered for throughout the year as well. So that's all there. Easy to see. If you have, for example, you only spray 10 products in your shed, you can just select all those products if you want. Bravo, Allegro. Let's get somebody else's products in here. Luna, Maravon, Serafel. You just select at the top, only show these 5 products. This only shows you those products. If that's all you care about, you can select on the list. If I go to list view, it'll put all those products in a list for me with all their notes, with all the PCP numbers. And if I hit print view, it just gives me a nice, easy print view that you can print off and throw on the wall. Most of the time, I like to set the settings to like 70%. You usually get a better view. If you make it a little bit smaller, you can cram more on one page. And so that's a one pager you can put it on in the wall of the shed if need be, or keep in the tractor. So all your quick Canada Gap information is there, REI, PHI, and PCP number. Yeah. There's a products page which lists all different products. Maybe useful for some. If you're a manufacturer, you can see all of the products of certain manufacturers that are in here. We are constantly adding to this and changing it. So if you have any really good requests or suggestions, we are open to feedback. I will pass it over to our next presenter. We have Art coming from Vive Crop Protection. So I will pull up his presentation and hand the floor over to him. All yours.
Very good. Thank you. Art Graves, Vive Crop Protection. We're new. Vive Crop Protection is a startup right here out of Toronto, Canada. So our company started out of the University of Toronto. We have 2 scientists that develop nanopolymers, which this is our nanopolymer model. And we've had products registered in Canada for about 3 years. Up until this past year, it was 1 product on 1 crop for 1 use. And that was azoxystrobin in potatoes. Now we've expanded that label into some crops that suit this area a little bit better. And we've gotten a second product labeled here just last month. So we're 20 years old, 20-year-old startup that is just now getting products registered here into Canada. We've been selling products in the States for about 6 or 7 years now. And we got started in the sugar beet industry primarily. So this this allospersed nanopolymer is what was developed at the University of Toronto by the two scientists, and it's represented here with two different colors and on the screen with two different colors because it has two different chemical properties: the ability to be mixed with water and be compatible, and the ability to be mixed with fertilizer and be compatible, and also interchange and protect the active ingredient. And so what we do is we coat the active ingredient with these nanopolymers, and that gives it the protection it needs to be able to interact in whatever environment it is in. And so this allospersed nanopolymer, and again, nano is small. So when we think of micro scale, what you get to see under the microscope, that's really small, at like 1,000x magnification. We're 100 times smaller than that. And so to give you a scale, this little nanopolymer would be on our active ingredient. The active ingredient would be the size of a beach ball compared to this nanopolymer. So that's how many of these polymers that would take to coat the active ingredient to give it that ability to be fertilizer compatible in this case. And then we're going to tell you a little bit more about some different chemical ability of these two. So here's what it looks like in fertilizer compatibility. So Asteroid is a azoxystrobin formulation that Vive took because it became off patent, added the nanopolymer, the allospersed nanopolymer to it, and it basically acts like a glove or a protectant or a suit of armor, as we heard earlier, to the active ingredient, and it allows it to go into fertilizers. And now you can go in furrow with azoxystrobin and fertility, liquid fertility, with superior compatibility for all different types of fertilizers, whether it's 11-30-4-0 all the way down to zincs and borons and some of the important nutrients we heard about earlier today. So that's the chemistry and that's the story. Here's the crops that this asteroid is labeled on. I told you about potatoes, sugar beet, mostly for rhizoctonia. So root crop diseases of rhizoctonia. Radish, we have an in-furrow label for radishes. And then the other crops here, carrots, daikon, horseradish, turnips, parsnips, rutabaga, and garden beets. An in-furrow banded use of azoxystrobin, and you can fertilize at the same time. So a really nice opportunity to get fertility in that furrow to grow better crops and be more efficient with a single pass. So we developed a prothioconazole formulation that we just got registered here in Canada too. And we developed it with the same allospersed nanoparticle. But what we found out is when we did trials, these are sugar beet leaves. When we did trials with sugar beets, we got better performance than the original product that's called Proline from Bayer. And we were getting better performance in the field with Cercospora leaf spot. And we wanted to find out why, because we didn't know. We just knew it was fertilizer compatible. We didn't know we made it better foliarly. So what we found out was the same chemistry that gives us fertilizer compatibility is the same chemistry that allows it to work in water. But then we think about the leaf surface being a waxy cuticle. The allosperse will orient itself to a part on the leaf so that the waxy cuticle and the lipophilic part of the allosperse will be able to stick together instead of beat up and roll off like water. The droplets stick and stay on the leaf. We get twice as much coverage of the leaf surface. After a rain event, we can keep twice as much of the active ingredient on the surface. So that's really where you see the difference in foliar performance with this formulation. The crops that it's labeled on, the cereal crops is very good for fusarium head blight of your cereals, your wheat, your triticale and rye and barley. Canola, it's a great white mold product. Again, that's probably from more out west. Around here, corn foliar in your rotation crops, soybean foliar. In corn, it's also, I use it a lot in corn on dairies that have a lot of mycotoxin issues. So corn, this is a great product for fusarium. The same disease that causes fusarium head blight is the same disease that causes mycotoxins in your corn. And through the tassel application, you can reduce mycotoxins in corn. And then again, we're pretty excited about its label in blueberries, chickpeas and lentils out west. And again, sugar beets here in Ontario, but that's out in the western part of the country. So just to give you a heads up of what we're doing with these polymers, this is the actual electron micrograph of the spheres that we've talked about here. We're able to take the same sphere and basically create a suit of armor. So the middle picture is these allospersed nanopolymers protecting bacterial cells, and we can increase the viability of bacterial cells. So when you're working with biologicals, we can get more of those alive to the site of activity because we can coat them and give them a suit of armor. And then we can also do that with things like BT proteins and RNAi proteins and deliver biochemicals and biologicals in a higher dose because we're getting them to the field. The last technology, we are not going to have it in Canada right away, but I think it's interesting to show the power of this nanochemistry is we've taken 2 active ingredients in the US that were not soil mobile, so they would get on the soil and bind and not move in the soil. We've put them covered with our nanopolymers, and we were able to make them go down into the soil about 7 to 9 inches with irrigation water and then stop them right there. So now you can get a much larger zone of protection of the crop. So the nanotechnology is real. It's intriguing and has a lot of capabilities, whether we're helping things move further in the soil, we can stop things from moving in the soil, we can protect bacterial cells, all with the power of chemistry developed right here in Mississauga, right down the road. That's all I have for you. I do have time for questions. Go ahead.
Any research on fusarium and celery?
No research on fusarium and celery. What we've done to this point is taking the original labels and trying to get the most out of them in the uses that we have. And so we generally do it more targeted. And so if there's an original label for fusarium and celery of this active ingredient, we could then jump on that label, but I don't think there is in prothioconazole. And that would be the one that I would think would have the best use. If there's a need, let us know, and we'll try to see if we can get enough money to do the research to deliver that product to you. So that is one thing that we're actively trying to do is bring more products to the Canadian growers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Art. Okay. Our last presentation of the day, we'll welcome up Tyler.
Thanks, Dennis. All right. So thanks everyone for sticking around till the end of the day here. So my name's Tyler Blauel, if you don't already know me. I'm the facility technician and IPM program coordinator here at the Muck station. So for the past 35 years, Shawn has been presenting the carrot variety trial results. So that's a little bit of time. So we both figured that it was time to give him a little bit of a break. So I'll be presenting the results today. And just as I get started here too, I just want to thank all of the seed companies year after year for submitting their seed and providing us with great seed. And we look forward to working with you again this year. Okay, so we first seeded the carrot variety trial on May 16th. We started to get real sporadic emergence. It wasn't looking very good. We went to go apply some irrigation just to kind of help it along, and our irrigation pump failed. So we got a substitute and we tried irrigating again, and the emergence was still way too sporadic. So we decided to reseed kind of at the last opportunity we had, and we reseeded it at the end of June 25th. And in our trial, we had 33 varieties from 6 seed companies. We harvested the carrots the 27th to the 31st of October, and we conducted the evaluations from the 5th to the 20th of January. We did apply irrigation throughout June, July to help get some germination going, protect from heat canker. It was a pretty hot season, as we all remember. Even after all that, we did just end up kind of with fair stands. We were hoping for a little bit better. We did have very low weevil and rust fly damage, likely due to the regular use of Rymon that we have been doing. But in addition to that, really this later planting, this later seeding date really misses that window that weevils could cause the majority of their damage. So our weevil damage was zero, actually, you'll see. At the end of it all, we ended up having poor to average kind of yields, likely due to kind of the immaturity of the carrots. They just didn't have the opportunity to really size up to exactly where we wanted them to be. We did have low incidence of cavity spots. It was a very dry end of summer and fall, which we kind of saw last year as well too, low cavity spot. And it related to that low rainfall throughout the fall and end of summer. It wasn't a very conducive environments for diseases to develop. So we ended up having very low blight as well too. The carrots ended up being kind of average in length, a little bit uneven within the cultivars themselves. And generally the colors were fair. They were a little bit light, again, probably related to the little bit of the immaturity that we were seeing. And we did find some cedars as well too. So in terms of our percent marketability, for our cellos, our trial average was 87.9%. And this ranged from 81 to 91.3%. And for our jumbos, trial average was 90%, and that ranged from 85.4 to 93.1% among all of the cultivars. And this is roughly a 2% increase in cellos and a 5% increase in jumbos compared to last year. So it's nice to see those little bits of increase. In terms of the top cultivars that had the highest percent marketability, first off, our cello, the one that came in number one, Brilliance from Stokes, 91.33%. If everybody remembers here, the numbers that come up at the beside the name of the cultivar, these numbers represent the number of years straight that cultivar has been in the top four of whatever category we're looking at. So in terms of percent marketable, Brilliance has been in the top four for the last 3 years straight. And then for our jumbos, we had Orchestro from Villemorin at 93.1%. Then we had Pink Punk from Villemorin at 91.32%. The jumbo 6105 from Seminus at 92.8%. The cello Naval from Bejo at 90.6%. This one has also been in the top four for the last 3 years straight. And the jumbo 6111 from Seminus with 92.6%. And Cello Bunch from Stokes, 90.4%, and War Mia, the jumbo from Rick Swan at 92%. So overall, marketability was fairly nice this past year. We were just kind of missing that size that we were really hoping for, and that was evident in our yields that you can see here. So our trial average for the cellos was 1,032 bushels an acre. This kind of ranged among all the cultivars from 677 to 1,289 bushels an acre, and this is a decrease of about 335. And again, a result of kind of the immaturity of the carrots. In terms of the jumbos, our trial average was 1,096, ranging from 600 to 1,505 bushels an acre, and a decrease of just under 500. So the top cultivars that had the highest yields were number one for the cello, Nevado. So 8 years in a row now, Nevado has been a top four yielder, and that's from Bejo, and that came in at 1,286 bushels an acre. Then the jumbo Silver Star from Stokes came in at 1,505 bushels an acre. Followed by Orange Fancy from Norseco at 1,240 bushels an acre. The jumbo Orchestro from Villemorin at 1,396 bushels an acre. The cello Gerada from Rick Swan at 1,159 bushels an acre, and the jumbo Altiplano from Villemorin at 1,343. And then lastly here, Brilliance coming in here again, top number three years in a row now it's been here, from Stokes at 1,145 bushels an acre, and the jumbo Baldillo from Bejo at 1,318 bushels an acre. So in terms of the cultivars and their the percent oversized carrots that we were finding, So these are any carrots that are over 1 inch and 3/4, kind of at that crown shoulder of the carrot. So the top, the cultivars with the top oversized were Trophy Pack with 15.2%, followed by Pink Punk with 50.4%, and then Enterprise from Stokes at 36.8%, and the trial average was 21.8%. So a little bit low. And in terms of the jumbos, Canberra from Bejo at 83.6%, Baldeo from Bejo at 68.8%, and Orchestro from Vilmorin at 68.1%. And the trial average for those was only around 52.8%. So lower than our previous trials. So in terms of score, so we score all the carrots based on a number of factors. Those being uniformity of shape, length, width, appearance, internal and external color, blight, and resistance to greening. The trial average was 6.66, so very average. 6 is a kind of, it's average on this kind of rating scale. Anything around a 7 or higher is good. 8 or higher is excellent, and you're getting higher from there. It becomes kind of perfect, but we don't see that too often. So our trial this year ranged from 5.86 to 7.62. And the top 3 cellos and jumbos with the highest scores were the cello Pink Punk from Vilmorin came in at 7.36. So this is more of kind of a purple reddish carrot. We kind of rated it as a standard kind of orange carrot though. You can take a look at it in our potting room over there. We have all of the cultivar displayed, all the onions, carrots, and beets also displayed over there. So feel free to take a look over there and check these out if you haven't already. And then our top jumbo was Berlin at 7.62, followed by the Cello Gerada from Rick Swan at 7.07. The jumbo type Yammer, I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce it, from Rick Swan at 7.38. Next, the Cello Crofton from Rick Swan at 7.02. And lastly, the Jumbo Nevado from Bejo at 7.19. So in terms of cavity spot, again, I was mentioning we had very little cavity spot at harvest. This is likely due to the dry fall that we experienced, similar to 2024 as well. Our trial average for cavity spot was 23%, and 23% of carrots having some sort of sign of cavity spot. And all the lesions we saw were either light to medium, so nothing major. And the range of cavity spot that we found throughout all the carrots in our trial was like a 3%. So 3% of carrots with a very light, to the highest being 55% of the carrots being a light medium rating of cavity spot. So again, similar to last year, we only did generally find 1 or 2 cavity spots per root. And the top cultivars with the lowest cavity spot were Trophy Pack at 3%, very light. Nevado from Bejo at 6.7% light. Baldeo from Bejo at 8% light. Gerada from Rick Swan at 12% light. And Orchestro from Vilmorin at 12%, more of a light medium. So I was mentioning earlier about the little weevil damage that we have been experiencing. So this year we also ended up having 0 weevil damage. We did have quite a high cumulative weevil per trap count. But again, this was a later seeded trial, so we missed a lot of that feeding window. And we did have a little bit of rust fly damage, but it was also quite minimal on station here as well too. So just moving on to the adaptation trial. So the adaptation trial, it's more of a kind of a small scale kind of trial. It's used as a way to test cultivars that maybe aren't ready or might be soon ready for commercial. But we kind of we seed them in a smaller scale trial to kind of see how they're going to do in the marsh in this muck soil. So we received a number of submissions from Enzazetta. And in terms of percent marketable of those cultivars, Cariana came in number one at 91.9%, followed by Calendor at 88.7%, then Calantis at 87.9%, then Calibra at 84.9%, and Vive following at 83.7%. And then in terms of yields, Calendor came in number one at 1105, followed by Cariana at 1038, Calantis with 873 bushels an acre, then Calibra at 856 bushels an acre, and Vive with 812. And in terms of scores, Calendor again came in number one at 6.71. Calibra came in at 6.57. Vive finished with 6.36. Cariana finished with 6.29, and Calantis finished with 6.29 as well. All right, now moving on to our storage trial. So these were the carrots grown in 2024. They were stored for around 38 weeks. So from our 2024 trial, we had 31 varieties from 6 seed companies. And first thing I want to mention is that the carrots did not store well. We had a lot of rot, and this could be due to a number of reasons. One of them being likely the dry harvesting conditions. It was quite dry in October when we were harvesting, so perhaps the carrots weren't at their healthiest going into storage. And in addition to that, this was also the first year that we had our new cold storage system. So we had some trial and error that we needed to do to kind of optimize it, get it to where we wanted it to be. And possibly during that period of time, while we were figuring everything out, there could have been quite a bit of rot occurring in the carrots as well during that time. And in saying all that, the percent marketable after storage ranged from only 3.6%. Only 3.6%. I'm not sure why that's happening. To 63.1%, and this is down from last year. Our percent weight loss ranged from 11.5 to 20.4%, and our percent decay rot ranged from 36.9 all the way up to 96.5%. So quite a bit of rot, as you can see, and this is an increase from last year as well too. But in saying all that too, the carrots that performed the best throughout storage were first Horticulture from Ville-Morin at 63.1% marketability after that time. Cellabunch at 54.8% marketability. Istanbul from Bejo at 49.7%. Jefferson from Bejo at 43.3%. And then Orange Fancy from Seminis at 38.6%. And then followed by a Nevado jumbo seeded rate from Bejo at 34.7%. So a lot of rot. In terms of our percent weight loss, the cultivars with the least amount of weight loss were Jefferson, Enterprise, Brilliance, and then followed by Cellabunch and Brava. And we had a trial average of around 15%. And this is about a 5% increase in weight loss compared to last year. And in terms of percent decay, percent rot, as you can see, our rot was quite high with the trial average of being around 75.4%. So this is a 30% increase in rot compared to last year. But the cultivars that rotted the least were Orchestro at 36.9%, Celebunch from Stokes at 45.1%, Istanbul from Bejo at 50.3%, then Jefferson from Bejo at 56.6%, and followed by Orange Fancy from Seminis at 61.4%. Okay, so that was our carrot variety trial information from 2024 storage to last year, 2025. So our 2024 to 2025 storage obviously didn't go so well, but this year our storage seems to really be kind of dialed in. Our carrots look much better. Again, take a look at them over in the potting room if you get a chance. And now moving on to our beet variety trial. So this is the second year we've been conducting this trial. If you remember from 2024, we didn't really have too much good luck with the trial. The location we chose was saturated for a good chunk of the year. But in 2025, we decided to basically put the trial on the other side of the farm. And we had some pretty good results this year. So we seeded our beet variety trial on July 3rd. We had 19 submissions from 6 seed companies, and we harvested these beets from the 15th to the 16th of September. And we conducted evaluations from the 17th to the 21st of November. We had some general fair stands at germination with good vigor. These stand counts were definitely better than the previous year. We're still looking to increase our stand counts and get a little bit better at that. Though this did end up with average to good yields, a lot of these being between 2 to 3 inch. We had low levels of blight, fairly uniform sizes, and the beets ended up having good interior and external colors as well too. In terms of the beets with the top percent marketable, we had Zeppo come in number 1 from Rick Swan at 95.3%, followed by Roditi from Rick Swan at 94.69%. Then Manolo from Bejo at 94.67%. Bazoo from Bejo at 94.66%. And lastly, Red Atlas from Illinois at 94.2%, and Borealis from Seminova at 93.7%. So some good percent marketability for the beets last year. So we ended up kind of with an average stand count or beet harvest of 5.5 beets per foot. Again, a lot of these were in the 2 to 3 inch range, and we ended up with around 15% jumbos. And the top 6 beets in terms of yield last year were, again, we see Zeppo up here. So this is the second year. Again, we've only conducted the trial 2 years in a row now, but Zeppo's up there again from Rick Swan with 749 bushels an acre. And Red Atlas from Illinois Seed Company at 737 bushels an acre. And I should have mentioned this earlier too when I was talking about the carrots, but when we calculate our total yield or our acreage, our yield per acre, it's from a yield sample that we take. So sometimes one fewer or one more of a carrot or a beet can have a bit of an impact on the total yield after calculation that we're presenting here. So we kind of use it as a bit of a relative yield, and we use it mostly to kind of compare among the cultivars that we're looking at. So just continuing on here, next up was Scarlet from Norseco at 707 bushels an acre. Then coming up was Red Cloud from Bejo at 702, followed by Manolo from Bejo at 690, and Borealis from Seminova at 665 bushels an acre. In terms of the scores for beets, so we rate the score based on the uniformity of shape, size, smoothness, internal and external color, and zoning, as well as neck finish and root attachment. So the trial average this year was around 6.42. This is fairly average. And those ranged from 5.30 to 7.59. And the top 4 cultivars with the highest scores were Bazo from Bejo at 7.59, followed by Manolo from Bejo at 7.11, And then Monty from Rick Swan at 6.87. And then Roditi from Rick Swan at 6.85. So these beets looked pretty good. So that was pretty much just a quick overview of the carrot and beet trials. More information can be found in our green book here. We do have green book copies available to everybody. So if you haven't grabbed one yet, feel free to grab one. The green book as well also has all of the research that we conducted on station with Mary Ruth's group, anything else that that Shawn and I conducted. So there's lots of good information in there. So take a look if you'd like. And then I just wanted to mention too, for any more information on anything going on at the station, feel free to visit our webpage, our YouTube channel, Muck Crops IPM, or our X or Twitter at Muck IPM. So feel free to check them out. And while you're there too, if you'd like to follow us, that'd be great as well too. And lastly, I just want to thank our summer students, Kieran and Maddie, for all their hard work last year. And that's everything I have for you. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. If not, thanks everybody for holding out till the end here. Tomorrow is our onion day. So feel free to come by around 9:30 or so for coffee and donuts. Presentations start again at 10 a.m. So we'll see everyone tomorrow.